nothing in the universe is like him. He has no father, no mother, no sister, no brother, no son, and no daughter. He exists without time and place because he is the creator of time and place. He does not reside above the throne, and he is not attributed with fatigue, like the Jews say. Our Lord is glorified beyond any imperfection that the non-Muslims attribute to him. Whatever you imagine in your mind, Allah Ta'ala does not resemble that. And whoever attributes an attribute of the creations to Allah is outside of Islam. And I testify that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the son of Abdullah, the son of Abdul Muttalib, the son of Hashim, the son of Abdul Manaf, from the tribe of Quraysh, is the best creation of Allah, and his final prophet and messenger sent to all humans and jinn, and he is truthful about everything that he conveys of the revelation. Thereafter, we remind ourselves to have the sincere intention for the sake of Allah in attending the session of Islamic knowledge, because having the sincere intention is a requirement to get the reward. So the Muslim, whenever he does a good deed, he has to have the sincere intention for the sake of Allah to get reward for that good deed. And we're going to start from page 99. That is the last page that we had. So we're going to start from the middle of the page, the second paragraph, where the author said, if the cast covers an organ. If the cast covers an organ among the organs of tayammum, then it is sunnah when doing tayammum to wipe also the cast with soil. But it is not an obligation. So one has to wipe it with water if it covers more than the ill part, but with soil it is sunnah to wipe. If the person needs in his ablution to wipe the cast, and if the cast is not on the organ of tayammum, and when one put it on, one was not in the state of ritual impurities, then one washes, wipes on the cast, and makes tayammum and prays, and then this person does not have to make up those prayers. Hence, in all other cases, one has to make up the prayers. The exception is if one put it while not in the state of ritual impurity, and it was not on an area which one wipes when making tayammum. An example is if someone has a cast on one's foot, and when he put it, he was not in the state of ritual impurity, then such a person makes wudu, and when he gets to his foot, he wipes on the cast and makes tayammum and washes the rest. Afterwards, he does not have to make up his prayer. Because originally, when he put the cast, he was not in a state of ritual impurity, and the cast is not on a part that one has to wipe when making tayammum. So one needs to wipe with water on the cast and make complete tayammum on the face and forearms, even if the cast is on one's foot. So for this case, these cases that he's talking about are where he's making the distinction between when he has to make up those prayers or not. So the one case is he put the cast on, not on an organ of tayammum, so other than the face and the hands. And when the cast was put on, he was on wudu or on ghusl. And he's automatically on wudu, he's on ghusl, and he's in a state of ritual purity. So in this case, he washes, wipes on the cast, makes tayammum, and prays. And he doesn't have to make up those prayers after the cast is taken off. So the example he gives, if someone has on a cast on their foot, and when he put it on, he was in a state of wudu, for example, then when this person now wants to, let's say he breaks his wudu, then he wants to make wudu again, he makes wudu in the normal way. When he gets to his foot, he wipes the cast and with his wet hand and makes tayammum like regular, and washes the rest. So he washes the other foot. So whatever obligatory prayer that he prays like that, he does not have to make it up. Because when he originally put on the cast, he was not in a state of ritual impurity. And the cast was not on a part that he has to wipe when making tayammum. And the cast was not on his hands or his face. So one needs to wipe with water on the cast and make complete tayammum on the face and forearms, even if the cast is on one's foot. Then the author said there are 5 cases pertaining to the cast. So the author said, if the cast is on an organ of tayammum, one needs to make up the prayers regardless of one's state when one put on the cast. So if the person broke his hand, so he's wearing a cast on his forearm, so whether he put the cast on while on wudu or he wasn't on wudu when he put the cast on, he has to make it up. If the cast is not on an organ of tayammum and it covered more than what was necessary for it to hold together and give the effect, and the person cannot take it off, then also in this case one needs to make up the prayers regardless of one's situation when one put on the cast. So here in this case, the cast is not on the face or the hands, but the cast covered more than what is necessary to hold the cast on the organ and give the effect. And for whatever reason, the person, he cannot take it off. So in this case, he makes up the prayers after he takes the cast off and after he gets healed. If he does the process and he does the prayer, then he has to make it up. If the cast did not take more than what is necessary, but when one put it on, one was in the state of ritual impurity, then one needs to make up this prayer. So he didn't put the cast on the face or the hands, and he was not on wudu when he put the cast on, and the cast only took up the amount of space on his body that is needed for the cast to stay on and to have the effect. In that case, he makes up his prayers after he takes the cast off, because he put it on without being on wudu. If the person was not in the state of ritual impurity when one put it on, and it is not on a part which one has to wipe when making tayammum, and it did not cover more than what is needed to hold together, then one does not need to make up the prayers. And that's the case that we mentioned earlier. If the cast does not cover any healthy part of the healthy organ, meaning it covers only the sick part, and when the person put it on, he was not in the state of ritual impurity, and it is not on a part which one has to wipe when making tayammum, in this case, one does not need to wipe it with water and does not need to make up the prayer. So here we have a case where the wound, if it is covered with something, it's only covered with something to the extent of the wound. It doesn't go beyond the wound. It doesn't extend beyond the sick part to a healthy part. So in this case, he was not on wudu, or he was on wudu, and he was in a state of purity, and the cast was not on his hands or his face. So in this case, he does the same process, except he doesn't have to wipe his wet hand over the wound, because whatever's covering the wound does not go beyond the wound. So only the sick part is covered. In 3 of these 5 cases, one needs to make up the prayer, and in 2 cases, one does not need to make up the prayers. So the 2 cases where the person does not need to make up the prayers is if he does not put it on his face or his hands, and he was on wudu when he put on the cast, then he does not have to make up the prayer after. And the second case is it's not on the face or the hands. The person was on wudu, and the cast was not on the face or the hands. The person does not have to make up the prayer. No. طيب, any questions about that before moving on? I mean, it takes some repetition, but if you memorize, then it'll stay with you. It says if someone had a cast and he makes wudu and wipes and makes tayammum and prays an obligatory prayer and then he wants to pray another obligatory prayer, he does not need to repeat washing nor wiping with water, rather only to repeat tayammum. So let's say that the person, he put on the cast. He put on the cast and he broke his wudu, and so he had to make wudu. So he does the process like normal. So he makes the wudu. The cast is taking up some of the healthy part, but for what's necessary. So he makes wudu until he gets to the cast part. Then he rubs his wet hand over the cast. Then he makes wudu. And then let's say he prays dhuhr. Now, after he prays dhuhr, he's done. He hasn't broken his wudu. He hasn't gone to the bathroom. He hasn't passed gas. Nothing has happened to invalidate the wudu. But now it's Asr time and he wants to pray. So now that he wants to pray Asr, does he have to make wudu again? Does he have to wipe on the cast again? No, he just has to make tayammum again. So for each obligatory prayer he wants to pray, he makes tayammum. One is not allowed to pray two obligatory prayers with one tayammum. It is permissible for one to pray one obligatory prayer and optional prayers with one tayammum, but not two obligatory prayers. So one cannot pray dhuhr and asr with one tayammum. Hence the one who is joining the prayers and needs to make tayammum and cannot use water, he makes tayammum for dhuhr, for example, and then after saying assalamu alaikum, he makes tayammum for asr and prays asr. Also, he cannot pray with one tayammum, the dhuhr prayer and the prayer which is originally not an obligation, but he made an oath to pray it, that is a nadhr. Rather, he needs to make another tayammum for it. By that we finish the chapter of tayammum. Now we're moving on to page 102, the Najas-Filth and how to purify the Mutanajjis. Mutanajjis is what is contaminated with Najas-Filth. Mutanajjis means something that has been contaminated with filth, so that it needs to be cleaned. Like a shirt that has vomit, like a shirt that has feces, like a shirt that has blood other than one's own wound, for example, and it's Allah. So the author said, remember, reading above the line first and then below the line. The Najas-Filth and how to purify the Mutanajjis. Every fluid that exits from the eliminatory outlets is Najas-Filthy, except mani. Washing all areas contaminated with urine and feces is obligatory, except the urine of the baby boy who has only had milk for nourishment. For the area contaminated with his urine is purified by spraying water on it. For here means because. Because the area contaminated with his urine is purified by spraying water on it. No Najas-Filth is exempted, except for little blood and pus, that which does not have flowing blood, if it fell into the container and died in it. So these are three things, yani. The little blood, a little amount of blood, and a little amount of pus. Those are two. And then the third thing is that which does not have flowing blood, like an ant, like a cockroach, like a flea. Certain of these insects, they don't have flowing blood. So whatever is like that, whatever doesn't have flowing blood, if it fell into the container and died in it, so if a fly fell into a bucket of water and died in it, that water does not become filthy. The author said, for it does not make it Najas-Filthy, yani, because it does not make it Najas-Filthy. All living things are pure, tahir, except the dog and the pig and what is born from them or from one of them. All of the dead things are najas-filthy, except the fish, locust, and the human. The container must be washed from the lapping of the dog and the pig 7 times, one of which is mixed with soil, and it must be washed from all other types of filth once by pouring water over it, and thrice is better. If wine became vinegar by itself, it is purified, and if it became vinegar by something thrown into it, it would not become pure. Now the explanation below the line, Abu Shuja' said that every fluid that exits from the eliminatory outlets is najas-filthy except mani. This is true whether that exits, whether what exits, this is true whether what exits. Okay, so there's a typo. Here in the hard copy it says exists. So that's page 102 all the way at the bottom. This is true whether what exits, it should say exits. So you should delete the S. So it says this is true whether what exits is an ordinary matter or not. A usual one or not. So if what comes out of the person is something usual, then that's something that is, if it's liquid, it's filthy. And if it's unusual and it's liquid, it's filthy. So if it's not something that normally comes out of the person, then still it's considered to be filthy, and the person would have to make istinja from it. And that thing itself, it will need to be purified. And that place that's contaminated with that will need to be purified from that thing, because what came out of him is filthy. So how does one judge if what came out of you is filthy? Number 1, if it's fluid. Number 2, if it's not mani. That's how we know. And so he's saying, it doesn't matter if what comes out of you is normal or not. If it's fluid and it comes out of your one of your 2 exits, then it's filthy. This includes blood, urine, feces, pus, madhi, and wadi. All of these are najas-filth, whether they exit from an edible animal or not. So the feces of the goat is filthy. So the urine of the cow is filthy. The feces of the cow is filthy. And if the animal was edible or not, its urine, feces would be filthy. Anyway, everything that we mentioned, his blood, urine, feces, pus, madhi, and wadi, all of these are filthy. He said except mani. Footnote 150. The mani of the human and the mani of the pure animal is tahir, pure. The exception is the pig and dog and what is born from them or from one of them. This is different from the milk of an animal. The milk of an edible animal is tahir. So the milk of a donkey is najas, but its mani is pure, tahir. So when we say an edible animal, we're referring to an animal that Islamically it is valid to slaughter it, and so you can eat its meat. So any animal that you can slaughter and then you can eat its meat is called an edible animal. Any animal that even if you do slaughter it, you're still not allowed to eat it, it's called a not edible animal. Like what? Like the donkey. So the mani of a human and the mani of an animal other than the dog and the pig and what comes from them is pure. The mani, as you know, for the male, it's referring to the semen. For the female, it's referring to a fluid that exists in her that is like the semen, of course. And when those 2 fluids mix together, that's how the woman gets pregnant. So this mani also exists in animals. So the mani of the human and the mani of the animal, other than the dog and the pig and what comes from them, is pure. The author said, this is so because mani is pure. It is not a najas-filth matter, whether it is the mani of a human being or an animal, except the mani of the dog or the pig or an animal which is born as a result of copulation between a dog and a pig. Or with one of them. So if a dog and a pig, they mate, the offspring of a dog and a pig are filthy. If a dog mates with any other animal, the offspring between the dog and that other animal is filthy. If a pig mates with another animal, the offspring of that pig and that other animal is filthy. So the mani of the dog or the pig or an animal which is born as a result of copulation between a dog and a pig or with one of them, meaning a dog or pig with another animal, is filthy. But it is sunnah to clean one's clothes from the mani before praying in them. So if you had mani on your clothes, it's sunnah to clean it off before praying in those clothes. Ash-Shafi'i said that the mani is not najas-filth because in verse 70 in Surah Al-Isra in the Quran it says وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. It means Allah endowed endowments on the people. Ash-Shafi'i said this special endowment in this verse means that their origin is pure. It is not a najas-filth entity. Also, Ash-Shafi'i relied on another proof, which is the hadith narrated by Muslim from Aisha radiallahu anha, that she used to scrub the clothes of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, meaning the area that had mani on it. And then he used to wear it and pray wearing it. And she used to scrape it off. The proof here is that she did not wash it. She would just scrape off the mani off of the clothes of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and she wouldn't wash it. So the proof is that if mani were a najas-filth, it would not have been sufficient to scrub it. I need to rub it off, to scrape it off. She would have needed to wash it. It is clear here that the mani meant in this hadith was a result of having sexual intercourse and not as a result of emitting mani while sleeping, because this does not happen to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When Abu Shuja said that every fluid matter that comes out of the eliminatory outlets, he is hinting by that not all the solid ones are najas-filth. So not every solid thing that comes out of the eliminatory outlet is najas-filth. There are two cases in regards to the solid matter that exits. Exits is a worm or something solid which was not changed by the inner parts of the body. Like if someone eats a grain of wheat and after a period of time it exits from the eliminatory outlet just like he swallowed it. That is, if you take it and plant it, it grows. This is not najas-filth originally. Rather pure, and now it is contaminated. So it is enough to wash it and it becomes pure again. On the other hand, if what exits is solid feces, then it is najas-filth. So when the author said fluid, and he's excluding solid things that come out of you that were not digested. So if a person, they swallowed some grains of wheat, and the wheat came out undigested, then it's simply something that's contaminated with filth and that would need to be washed. It doesn't mean that it itself becomes filthy. But if something comes out, even though it's not liquid, it's solid, but it happens to be feces, then that thing is filthy. The najas-filth entities are subdivided into three categories. The first one is the mughallava. You can say you can say severe najis or you can say severe. But here it's saying intense. This refers to the Najas-Filth of a dog, a pig, or what is born from both of them, or from the copulation of one of them with another animal. The second type is the Mutawassita, medium Najas-Filth, which is like urine, blood, feces, pus, wine, and the like. The third is the Mukhaffafa, light Najas-Filth, and this refers to the urine of a little boy, not a girl, who is less than 2 years old, and until now, all of what he had for nutrition is milk and no other matter as nourishment. Milk here means from a woman or other than a woman. No. So when we say mughalladha, and it's referring to the process that we have to do in order to purify the place contaminated with that type of filth. So if it's mughalladha, a certain process is done. If it's mutawassita, a certain process is done. If it's mukhaffafa, a certain process is done. Let's read footnote 152. I feel like you guys can benefit from it. Footnote 152. The urine of the baby boy is less dense than the urine of the baby girl. The place contaminated with the urine of the baby boy can become pure by sprinkling water over the urine. The water need not to flow over the place, but the sprinkling of the water needs to cover the entire area of the urine. So the difference for that, and this is the mukhaffafa najasa, the filth that is lightened. The difference is that the water doesn't need to flow over it. That is sufficient just for the water to be sprayed on it. Note, some scholars said that this sprinkling of water must remove the characteristic of the urine, color, taste, and odor. Also, before sprinkling the water, one needs to twist, squeeze out the urine from the place, or let it dry out to the point where the dampness does not accumulate and fall off when squeezed. So if it was damp, where one cannot squeeze out any urine, then one can sprinkle the water on it, and then the place is judged as pure. The urine that separates is najas. So that's a good detail to know for the urine of the boy. The author said, from another perspective, the Najas-Filth can be subdivided into two categories, yani from a different aspect. Now, not saying mukhaffafa or mughalladha or mutawassita, not saying intense or medium or light. Now we're categorizing based on the filth, the entity, the appearance of the entity of the filth itself. So from another perspective, the Najas-Filth can be subdivided into two categories, Ayniyya and Hukmiyya. Ayniyya means that the entity of the Najas-Filth itself exists. One can detect it with the senses, so it has a size, color, smell, and taste, or some of those. As for the second type, the Hukmiyya, it is a Najas-Filth which has no more any size. One cannot detect it with one's senses. So the judgment of the place contaminated by it is that it is a Najas-Filthy place, but if one looks at it, one cannot detect any Najas-Filth on that place. Washing all areas contaminated with urine and feces is obligatory, except the urine of the baby boy who has only had milk for nourishment. For the area contaminated with his urine is purified by spraying water on it. Washing the areas contaminated by Najas-Filth means, even if the Najas-Filth is of an edible animal according to the Shafi'i school, if the person did not commit a sin by being contaminated with this Najas-Filth, For example, one did not take a bottle of alcohol and pour it on oneself, then it is obligatory to remove this Najas-Filth to clear oneself from it when one wants to pray. So it does not mean that one has to do it immediately, but one has to do it before praying. So one does not pray while having Najas-Filth on oneself. One of the proofs for washing the areas contaminated by Najas-Filth is a hadith narrated by Bukhari and Muslim pertaining to a Bedouin who came to the mosque of the Prophet ﷺ and urinated inside the mosque. The Prophet ﷺ ordered the companions to clean the contaminated, to clean the area contaminated by urine by using water. So, footnote 155. If the najasa can only be removed with soap, then one needs to use the soap. Sometimes only the color remains and it can only be removed with soap, then one needs to use the soap. If the taste remains even after washing, then it is still najas. Because if the taste remains, it is an indication that the najasa remained. If after washing only the color remained, it is considered pure. And if only the smell remained, it is considered pure. But not if both the color and the smell remained. Also, footnote one. Okay, we'll get to that. So basically, what they're saying here is that the urine of the baby boy who has only had milk for nourishment, this type of filth, the mukhaffafa, is purified by spraying water on it. So washing the areas contaminated by Najas-Filth means even if the Najas-Filth is of an edible animal, according to a Shafi'i. So if a goat, let's say, urinates on your clothes, you have to, it's an obligation to purify those clothes from the filth in order for the prayer to be valid, and for him to be able to pray with those clothes, even though the goat is an edible animal. The next part, the Ayniyya najasa is the najasa that is physically detectable. The area contaminated by it is cleaned by washing it with water until it is removed. If it rains and removes it, it is enough if it does the job. So another typo here. Third line, third paragraph, third line, sixth word. Should say removes it. So there's the V and the M need to be changed places. So the area that is contaminated by Ayniyya najasa, the physically detectable najasa, it is cleaned by washing it with water until it is removed. So if it rains, let's say like on the sidewalk, there was somebody vomited on the sidewalk, so there's a puddle of vomit on the sidewalk. But then like a thunderstorm comes and it rains really heavily and that water washes it away until that vomit is removed, then that's enough. It does the job. And that's enough, it removes everything. Footnote 156. If the water was little and it was used to remove the najasa from something, then the water has to flow over the najasa so that it can purify the place. This is of course if certain conditions are met. However, the opposite is not true, meaning if something has najasa on it and you place it in a small body of water, it does not become pure. This is because the water is weak when it is a little amount. So this little water does not have the strength to remove the najasa. On the other hand, if this little amount of water was poured on the najas item, then that pouring gives the water more strength to remove the najasa. Likewise, if the water was a lot of water has strength. The small amount of water has the strength to remove when poured, but not to push away. And the large amount of water has the strength to remove and push away. So then the author said, so it is washed with water until the physical entity and its traces are removed. Traces here means color, taste, and smell. If by just washing it, it is not removed, one needs to do something like rubbing it. If they are not removed except by rubbing the area, one needs to do that if it is an easy matter. Now, if one washes it and rubs it and the taste remains, so one gets to a point where one is convinced it is not going to go away, meaning the taste will remain there, and one does not have any means to remove it except by cutting the area, in this case, this Najas-Filth is still there. However, if one washes it and the taste goes away, but the smell or color does not go away, despite putting a little more effort in scrubbing, one concludes it is difficult to remove it. It is possible, but it is difficult to remove. At that point, the area is no longer considered Najas-Filthy, even if a little color remains. If, however, both of them remain, the color and smell, then the area is still Najas-Filthy. It is not pure, but it is overlooked because it is very difficult for you to remove it. In Turkey, there is an old mushaf, and on it, there are still traces of the color of the blood of our master Uthman ibn Affan, because when they killed him, he was reading the Quran. So that book exists in Turkey, and it still has the traces of the color of the blood on it. Sometimes the traces of the color of blood are difficult to remove. Allahu Akbar. And that version or what our master Uthman compiled and what he was using is still intact. And the Muslims still recite it word for word without any discrepancy or change. MashaAllah. The Najas-Filth, which one cannot detect physically, one cannot detect it by one's senses, such as if a place contaminated by urine, which dried after a period of time and it no longer has any color, taste, or smell, then it is najasa hukmiyya. In this case, it is enough to wash the contaminated area once by water and it becomes pure. This means to pour the water on it. The water runs on it. The urine of the little boy who was less than 2 years old and who did not take other than milk as nourishment, the area contaminated with his urine is purified by spraying water on it. So if a boy, not a girl, who was less than 2 years old did not take any nourishment other than milk, if such a boy urinates on an area, then it is not a condition that the water runs on the contaminated area for it to become clean. It is enough to sprinkle the water on it to cover it with water. Of course, this is if this removes the traces of the najasa, so there is no more color, taste, or smell like the other types of najasa. This is so because the Prophet ﷺ said in what Abu Dawood and others narrated what means that the area contaminated by the little boy's urine, it is enough to sprinkle the water on it for it to become clean. But for the little girl, one has to wash what is contaminated by her urine. Al-Hakim classified this hadith as being sahih. If the little boy takes other than milk as nourishment, then one needs to wash the contaminated area, as is the case with the girl. Then Abu Shuja' started talking about the exempted Najas-Filth. He said that no Najas-Filth is exempted except for little blood and pus. Footnote 158. Yasir here means the norm and al-urf. So a little amount is known by the norm, and the large amount is known by the norm. The prayer is valid even if there is a little blood or little pus on one's clothes or body. It is exempted. However, if the blood or pus is a lot, then it is not exempted. It invalidates the prayer unless it is a lot of blood from, number one, oneself, because a lot of blood from other than oneself is not exempted. And if this blood was, two, not caused by one's actions, because if it was caused by one's actions, then it would not be exempted. And three, if the blood does not go beyond the place it settles to, even if it is a large amount, because if this large amount of blood settled to a certain place, and then it went beyond that, then this would not be exempted. So, those are the parameters for it to be exempted. And that which does not have flowing blood, if it fell into the container and died in it, for it does not make it Najas-Filthy. Yani because it does not make it Najas-Filthy. So if someone has a little bit of blood, whether it is his blood or others' blood, a little bit of blood on his clothes or a little bit of pus, he can pray without cleaning it, because this is an exempted Najas-Filth. Except if this blood and pus are from an intense exempted Najas-Filth, meaning except if it is the blood or pus from a dog or pig, then it is not exempted. So a little bit of blood and pus is overlooked in the body or on the clothes. In both cases they are overlooked. Of course, this is the case if the person did not contaminate oneself intentionally with the blood. If one contaminates oneself intentionally with the blood or the like, this blood is not overlooked even if it is a little amount. However, if it is a lot of blood or pus from other than oneself, then it is not overlooked. In the case that it is a lot of blood, but it is one's own blood, it is overlooked except if the blood runs out from the wound and stops. And then after stopping, it goes further. For example, if one's head is wounded and the blood runs until reaching the shoulder and stops at the shoulder, and then after that it goes beyond the shoulder for one reason or another and contaminates, for example, the upper arm, in this case one looks at the quantity which went beyond the shoulder. If it is little, it is still overlooked, but if it is a lot, then it is not overlooked. From this we know that if someone is wounded in the head and then the blood covers his head, and when he is making ruku', the blood drops, for example, on his feet, then those drops on the feet are overlooked except when it becomes a lot. This is so because this area is not the area where the blood reaches usually from his wound. So this is not like the case if someone is wounded in the head and the blood runs without stopping all the way to the ground. Because if this is the case, it is still overlooked. If one is wounded, the blood goes out and it stops. This is the place where the blood reaches usually. After that, if it runs again and goes beyond that place, one needs to check that area that it went to and see if it is a little. It is overlooked, and if it is a lot, it is not. The proof for that is what happened with one of the companions when he was guarding the Muslims at night. During that he prayed, and while praying the enemy shot him with an arrow. So he bled a lot, and in spite of that, he continued his prayer. He kept going with his prayer. Had a lot of blood in this case not been overlooked, he would not have continued his prayer. Note, if someone had a dried cut, and then he opened it, and because of that, it dripped on his pants. In this case, if it is a little bit, it is overlooked, and if it is a lot, he has to wash it before praying, because he caused it. What is considered by the norm a lot is a lot, and what is considered by the norm a little is a little. As for the blood that comes from the outlets of the body, such as from the nose or mouth, this has specific details. In regards to the animal whose blood does not run if you cut its organ, it does not make the water Najas-Filthy if it falls in it and dies in it. Those little insects which if you cut one of their organs, their blood does not run out, like fleas, mosquitoes, cockroaches, and the like, if one of them falls while alive in the water, even if it is little water or in another liquid and dies in that liquid, it does not render the water najis. And fleas should be F-L-E-A-S, fixed them. Likewise, if it falls while dead, except if it is thrown intentionally in the water while dead, then it is not overlooked. If many fell, and as a result they changed the water, then it becomes Najas-Filthy. And the word water also has a typo, the letter N extra. If those insects grow in the water like some worms, and they die in it like some worms, they do not render that liquid Najas-Filthy. Abu Shuja' summarized a lot because there are many other accepted najasat. Another example, footnote 161. Another example is the little, according to the norm, amount of hair from a cat. It is exempted. Under 10 hairs is considered a little amount. All living things are pure, tahir, except the dog and the pig, and what is born from them or from one of them. Abu Shuja' means everything that has a soul is pure, except what we mentioned. This implies if a worm grows in a Najas-Filth, it is pure. He said, except the dog, even if it is a hunting dog or for protection. Likewise the pig, whether it is domesticated or not. Likewise, if a pig and a dog mate and an animal is born from them, it is najis. As for the mani, which is the origin of animals, its judgment is like the judgment of the animal that emits it. As for the part which is cut off from an animal while it is alive, this was mentioned previously. What separates from an animal, such as the sweat of an animal, if this animal is najis, then this separated thing is najis, so the sweat of a dog is najis. If the animal is pure and what separates from this animal is similar to sweat like saliva, then it is pure. If the separating matter is changed inside the animal before it separates, like urine, whose origin is food and water, and it becomes urine or feces or vomit, such matters are najas-filthy, except some cases, which the rules of the religion judge as not najis, such as eggs, milk, and honey. Note, the liquid that intoxicates is najis. All of the dead things are najas-filthy except the fish, animals of water, locusts, and the human. 162. Footnote 162. Al-Mayta, animals that are not slaughtered following the Islamic rules, and all non-edible living things that die are najis, except for the fish, what can only live in the sea, locusts, and human. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. We got to page 110. Page 99 to page 110. We'll continue inshallah next week. If there are no questions, we'll conclude. See a question here. I'll double check that. It's any predatory animals?
Yeah.
No.
Huh?
طيب هل لا إله إلا الله اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات وبارك الله فيكم. السلام